Alright, so welcome back to your favorite inorganic tutor YouTube channel. Today we're going to look at how we can find the inverse of a particular function, right? But don't forget to press on the notification bell and I'll produce with more content on calculus, chemistry, physics, economics, and mathematics, alright? And also probability or the exam P questions, alright? So now, let's go ahead and see and look at a particular problem on how to find the inverse of a function. So our first problem is going to be 2x plus 1 all over x minus 1, right? So we want to find the inverse of this particular function, right? So how do we find the inverse of this particular function, right? So when you are given a function and you want to find the inverse of that particular function, first, let the function equals a variable called y, right? So when you have that equals y, then you go ahead right? So once you have this, now interchange the position of the variables. Interchange the position of the variables. So when we do that, that means that x goes to y position and y will come to x position, right? So when you have that, then you make y the subject. So making y the subject, you have cross multiply here, right? So when you cross multiply, now let's expand this bracket. Sy minus x should be equal to 2y plus 1, right? So let's bring this to this side and send this to this side, right? So we have sy minus 2y should be equal to x plus 1, right? So sy minus 2y should be equal to x plus 1, right? So we want to make y the subject. So we factor y out here and we have y into x minus 2 should be equal to x plus 1, right? So we divide through by x minus 2, x minus 2, right? So we have y equals x plus 1 over x minus 2, right? So this has become the inverse of this particular function, right? So therefore, we can say that the inverse of the function f inverse of the function x is equal to x plus 1 over x minus 2. Very, very simple. So this is the process we go through to find the inverse of a particular function. Very, very simple. So first, when you have the function, this function can be of any variable. It can be h of x, it can be g of x, it can be anything, right? So when you have the function, first, let the function equals a variable y, right? After that, when you do your necessary positions, then interchange the position of the x and the y, right? So when you have that, then you make sure you make y the subject. After making y the subject, whatever result you have becomes the inverse of the particular function. Good. So let's look at the next problem on how to find the inverse of a function. How to find the inverse of a function. So our next problem is g of x is equal to 2x plus 5 all over x minus 3, right? And you want to find the inverse of this particular problem, right? So first, let y equals g of x, right? So we have y equals 2x plus 5 over x minus 3, right? So once you have this, interchange the position of the x and the y variables, right? So we have x equals 2y plus 5 all over y minus 3, right? So now let's cross multiply to find the value of y. So we have x into y minus 3 into 2y plus 5, right? So when you have this, make y the subject. So making y the subject, we have xy minus 3x equals 2y plus 5, right? So we are going to have xy minus 2y is equal to 5 plus 3x, right? So we have y equals, let's factor y out, right? So when we factor y out, we have x minus 2 equals 5 plus 3x, right? So making y the subject, we have 5 plus 3x all over x minus 2, right? So this becomes the inverse of this particular function g. So the inverse of the function will be g inverse of x equals 5 plus 3x all over x minus 2, right? Very, very, very simple. So this is our second problem on how to find the inverse of a particular function, right? So let's look at the next part, the next problem on how to find the inverse of a function. On how to find the inverse of a function. So the third problem is 6x plus 15. 6x plus 15. So we want to find the inverse of this particular problem. All right. So as usual, let y equals 6x plus 15, right? So it make interchange the position of the x and y. So we have x equals 6y plus 15. So making y the subject, we are going to have 6y equals x minus 15, right? So we have y equals x minus 15 all over 6, right? So this becomes the inverse of this particular function x, right? So the inverse of f of x will be f inverse of x, which should be equal to x minus 15 all over 6. So this has become the inverse of this particular function, f of x, right? So let's look at the third problem on how to find the inverse of a function. On how to find the inverse of a function. So the third problem is, our fourth problem is g of x is equal to 4 into x minus 3 power 5 plus 21, right? So when you have a function like this, just let g of x equals y, right? So y should be equal to x minus 3 power 5 plus 21, right? So making, doing your interchange or interchanging the variables of x and y, we will have x equals 4 into y minus 3 power 5 plus 21, right? So we have, let's make sure we take this 21 to this part. So we have x minus 21 should be equal to 4 into y minus 3 power 5, right? We need y. So let's divide 2 by 4 by 4, right? So we're going to have y power 3, y minus 3 power 5 should be equal to x minus 21 all over 4, right? So now we can take the fifth root on both sides to make sure that we get the value of y, right? So we have y minus 3 should be equal to the fifth root of x minus 21 over 4, right? So now we can make y the subject, right? So we have y is equal to the fifth root x minus 21 all over 4 plus 3, right? So this is the inverse of the function given, right? So now we can say that the inverse of j of x is equal to the fifth root of x minus 21 over 4 plus 3. And this is the inverse of this particular function given, right? So this is our fourth problem that we have been able to work on, how to find the inverse of a function. So let's give out the last problem, and then we can close on how to find the inverse of a function. So problem 5, the function is h of x is equal to the third root or the cube root of 5 minus 11. 5 minus 11x, right? So here we do the same process. Y should be equal to h of x, right? So we have y equals cube root of 5 minus 11x, right? So here we interchange the position of the x and the y. So we have y, x here should be equal to the cube root of 5 minus 11y, right? So making y the subject, we cube root both sides. We cube both sides, right? So we have x power 3 should be equal to the cube root of 5 minus 11y all power 3, right? So this takes off the cube root. And now we have 5 minus 11y should be equal to s cubed. So making y the subject, we are going to have 11y is equal to s cubed. 11y is equal to s cubed 5 minus s cubed, right? So we divide through by y, and we have, divide through by 11, and we have 5 minus s cubed all over 11, right? So this has become the inverse of the function, right? So this is the inverse of the function. So it is very, very simple on how to find the inverse of a particular function. So let me address the function. So when you are given a particular function and want to find the inverse of that particular function, one, let the function equals a variable y, right? After that, you do your positions. Then interchange the position of the x and the y. Put x at the y variable position and the y at the s variable position. Now, after you do that, make sure you make y the subject. So after you make y the subject, the result obtained becomes the inverse of that particular function. Therefore, you can conclude that the inverse of that particular function is the inverse, just take inverse, right, of that particular function, and that becomes the result. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel on YouTube. That is the Inorganic Tutor on YouTube. Thank you very much. Bye.